And we are back. In the last video, we looked at Firebase security rules. It was a pretty easy step making our app a little bit more secure. That was making our backend database secure. In this video, we're going to stay on this security theme, but we're going to do something a little bit more relevant to our specific code base. And primarily what we're going to look at here is the AI services that we created back in the last section of the course. So in order to have the OpenAI service package in our code, we needed to include the API key in our code base. And this is working, obviously, but there is some chance of somebody getting access to our bundle, reverse engineering the bundle, being able to extract the API key, and then using that API key. Now, if somebody were to do that, as soon as we figured it out, we would go and cancel the API key and create a new one. But there would be a time period where somebody would have access to our API key. And when we do that, the version of our app that's using that API key would then break once we cancel that key. So the question is, how do we get our API key a little bit more secure than the setup that we have now? There is two steps that we're going to talk about. One is good and then one is great. So firstly, the core problem here is that the API key is in the bundle. It is hard-coded in our code. So one easy step that we could do would be just move our API key onto the server. We could put this in a document in Firebase, then create a function that says like get API key, async throws, return a string, and then every time our app launches, we fetch the key, and then we don't have it baked into our bundle. This is a great intermediate, fairly easy first step that is much better than having it baked into the bundle. So if you're not going to do what we're going to do in this video, then this is the method that I would recommend. Just put the API key in Firebase, then you fetch it every app launch, and the Firebase fetch requests are all encrypted, so you should be pretty good to go. But one step that's even better than that would be to move all of the OpenAI code onto the server. So we can create functions that live on the server that run all of our code. So rather than having OpenAI code in our code, all of this stuff, we can move all of this to a function that runs on the server. And so much so that when we create these functions, we'll actually remove the OpenAI package from our code base completely. This is a couple really big benefits. The first one is obviously our API key is never going to be even touching our client-side app because all of the code that requires the API key will stay on the server. Secondly, if we wanted to iterate or change some of this code, we can now do it on the server and not need to update our code base. And then thirdly, if we have multiple apps that are using the same AI dependency, so whatever that is, here it's OpenAI, I could have my Android app point to the same server functions as my iOS app. So now I can build these functions on the server once and have all the different clients point to the same endpoints. So moving functions to the server is mostly good, and it's not limited to OpenAI. We can move basically anything onto the server. But in this video, we're just going to do the OpenAI endpoints because we're primarily focused on fixing the security problem that is having our API key in our bundle. I will put a bunch of links below. We're going to go through a bunch of docs here. If we look at our database and go to the build section and go to the functions, we will see a list of all the functions that are deployed on our Firebase server. So right now, obviously, we don't have any. And then Firebase, of course, has documentation on how to deploy a function. And this is primarily what we're going to do. The gist of this is that we're going to create a either JavaScript or TypeScript file, and then using the terminal, we're going to push that file onto the Firebase server, and that file will have the endpoint. So I'm not going to read through all of this, but going through these steps here, create a Firebase project. We obviously already have that. Go ahead and click continue, set up Google Analytics. We've done all that good stuff. Set up your environment with Firebase CLI. CLI stands for Command Line Interface. So this is a interface that basically runs in our terminal so that using the terminal, we can interact and upload to Firebase. In order to do this, we're going to need Node.js environment to write functions. So we're going to need to install Node.js, And then we're going to need to install npm node version manager as well. Now, I've of course done this before, but I've uninstalled everything from my computer, so I'm going to go through the steps of installing everything with you guys as well. Go ahead and open up the terminal on our computer. From your terminal, you can run node-v, and this will give you the version of Node if you already have it on your computer. So I clearly do not have it, so now you can check if you have it already. If you don't have it, there's two ways to install it. One way would be going through Node.js website, which I will also link below, and you can install it here, or we can do it through Homebrew. Homebrew is a package manager for installing packages for Mac. It is probably the main way that these packages get installed, and that's what we're going to do in this video. So in addition to Node-v, you can run Brew-v to find out if you have Homebrew already installed. If you don't have Homebrew installed, I will put the link below. We just have to copy this and run this in our terminal. So let's copy it, jump back into the terminal, paste it, and this should install to your Mac. Press enter or return. Press enter. My assumption is that most of you guys already have this installed. Installation successful. I'm not sure if this warning is relevant or not. Let's go ahead and check if we have it. Brew-v. All right, so we don't. Run these next steps to add Homebrew to your path. Echo this. Let's go ahead and run it. Echo this. Let's go ahead and run it. And then eval this and run it. Let me type brew-v. And now I got Homebrew 4.4.3 on my computer. If you already have Homebrew installed and you want to make sure that you're on the latest version, just run brew update. And that should update. We're already up to date. Cool. Additionally, if you have packages installed with Homebrew that you want to update the packages that you installed, you could run brew upgrade, and that would do the same thing. But I don't have any packages installed because I just uninstalled it for this tutorial. Now that we have brew installed, now we can install node. So we can run brew install node. So the brew package manager will now install the node package. So again, this was Homebrew. This is the Node website here. Node.js is a free open source JavaScript runtime environment. Anyone who's written anything JavaScript has this on their computer already. All right. Looks like it worked. Let's run node-v. I'm on version 2023.1. I can also run brew upgrade node to try to upgrade to the latest version of Node, which I'm sure we're already on the latest version. You can also run npm-v. So within Node is something called Node Package Manager. You can think of it just like Swift Package Manager. SPM, this is npm. And it should be included with your Node version, so 10.9.0. All right, going back to Firebase docs, we now have Node set up for Node.js and npm. Once we have Node and npm installed, we can now use npm. So just like Swift Package Manager to install Swift packages, we're now running Node Package Manager to install Node package, npm install Firebase tools. Back to the terminal, paste it in. All right, added 642 packages in 30 seconds. I think we are good to go. Let's run now Firebase -- version, and that should tell us the version of the Firebase package we have. 13.231. All right. So at this point, you now should have brew installed, node installed, npm installed, and Firebase package installed. Great job, everybody. Let's jump back to the docs in Firebase. Now it is time to initialize a project. So just like when we go to the Firebase website, you have to log in to go to your project. Now we need to log in into the Firebase package that we just installed. Let's run Firebase login. All right, Firebase optionally collects command line and emulator suite usage and error reporting. I don't really care about that. I'm just going to type no, press enter. All right, visit the URL to log in. This should have opened up a website in your browser. Go ahead and log in. And once you log in, it's going to ask you to allow the Firebase CLI. And then there we go. I got my success. I'm now logged in. And from our project, we're only going to write Firebase Cloud functions. We're not going to be interacting with our Firestore database directly. So we're just going to run Firebase init functions to set up our project. But first, we need to go to our Firebase project directory. So in the command line, we need to now move to where we want to save this project. So I opened up my Finder here, and this is where my project folder is that we just opened up. All the other projects are a bunch of my public repos on GitHub. But in here is our Xcode project. So I want to move to this parent folder, GitHub. I don't want to go into my actual Xcode project. We're going to create another separate project from our GitHub project that should be next to and outside of your Xcode project. So I'm going to take the folder here where my project is. I'm going to cd, change directory, and let's drag in that folder to go into our project. And then from there, I just want to go up one level. So I will do cd with 2 dots. That will go up to my GitHub. This is the parent folder from my course here. Now inside this folder, let's create a new project. Next to the AI chat course, let's make a directory or make a folder called AI chat course cloud functions. So let's press enter. So now I have my new folder up here. Let's go into that folder, change directory into AI chat course. And now that we're inside of this folder, we can actually go ahead and make our project. So just like the doc said, we could now run this if we were using Firestore, but we're going to run functions because that's obviously what we're using. Let's jump in here. Let's run Firebase init functions. And while I do this, I will open up the folder here so we could see some files start to come in. Click enter. All right. Firebase. How cool is that? Project setup. Let's associate this project directory with a Firebase project. This is now asking us which Firebase project we want to use. So obviously an existing project, let's press enter. These will be all the projects that are connected to the Firebase account that you're logged into. So if you logged into the wrong account, you could then run Firebase logout and log into a different Firebase account. I just have a bunch of test projects here. AI chat course is the one that I'm working with in this series. Click enter. It's asking us which language we want to write these functions in. So we have the convenience of doing these functions in JavaScript, TypeScript, or Python. And we are going to use probably the least popular of these, but TypeScript. So if you've never written JavaScript or TypeScript before, you'll find that the syntax is actually pretty similar to Swift. But Swift is a type-safe language. So when we code, we have to make sure everything is a specific type, like a strict type. We're always doing that in our code base. A bool can always be a bool. An int can only be an int. TypeScript is basically the type-safe version of JavaScript. So I think TypeScript is going to be much closer to the code that we write in Swift. And that's why I think most Swift devs should probably opt for TypeScript when possible. And then Python is fairly easy to write, but the syntax is much different than Swift. So we're going to run with TypeScript, press enter. Do you want to use ESLint? Just like in our Xcode project, we installed SwiftLint. This is now asking us if we want to use their ESLint. I'm not an expert at TypeScript, and I don't really want to deal with all of the weird errors that we're going to get from the linting. So let's go ahead and put no, N for that. Do you want to install dependencies with NPM Node Package Manager? Let's go ahead and put yes, and then run this. We should see our actual packages start to flow in here to our project. Now you should have your project, and you should have a bunch of files in here. All right, so I'm going to double click on the index.ts and open it with Visual Studio Code. You could technically do it with Xcode, but it feels maybe a little wrong. The VS Code is much more common for coding with TypeScript, JavaScript, basically anything outside of Swift. So go ahead and open it up. If you don't have VS Code on your computer, you can go ahead, just go to the website. I'll also link it below and download it for Mac OS. If you really don't want to install it, you can use Xcode as the editor, but I'm going to run with VS Code for the rest of this section. Let's go ahead and open up the entire project in VS Code. So I will open up a VS Code, and inside VS Code, let's open up the whole folder and click open. It should look something like this. We can see our folder, our functions, our source folder with our index.ts. When we run this project, the index.ts is the first file that's going to execute. Index.ts, ts meaning TypeScript file. If we chose JavaScript, this would be index.js. Let's go ahead and delete some of the code up here. Just like in Swift, when we import at the top of our file, we import Swift UI, we import Foundation. Here we need to import the Firebase functions. So at the top right now, the default is importing something called onRequest, a function called onRequest from Firebase functions v2 folder, HTTPS folder. So now we can use something called onRequest in our code. The difference between Swift packages and these TypeScript packages is that we can import, instead of just importing an entire project, you can import just one function. So here we're importing just one function called onRequest. Alternatively, if you want to import the entire package, you use the star. So the asterisk here is import everything, call it logger from the logger folder. Alternatively, we could import everything from Firebase functions. So rather than importing specific things, we could come here and say import everything, call it functions from Firebase functions, and get rid of the HTTPS like this. So now we import everything from Firebase functions rather than just the logger and the onRequest method. I will comment that out right now because I don't think that we need to do it. All right, we're going to get started now by just writing a very simple function and getting that onto the server. And Firebase has already given us some logic here. So I will highlight this and uncomment this out. Let's go ahead and delete this extra code here. Export, meaning when we go ahead and upload this to Firebase, export this function. This is a constant. Think of constant, sort of like a class in Swift that is called hello world that has this onRequest method. We can see in the docs here, this is a function that takes a HTTPS request. And this is going to be the function inside this closure here. So the syntax is semi-similar to Swift. It's definitely human readable. Firebase has a logger so that you can log things to the console. This is just like printing to the console. Alternatively, if we didn't want to use the Firebase logger, we could come in here and say console.log, and then we can log hello world. And we need to add a semicolon at the end of each line in TypeScript. Both of these should work. This is the Firebase logger, which is probably a little bit better for our purposes. Structured data, I think, is always maybe true, so we don't need to include that. Just as some examples, let's change the name of this function. We're going to make this called hello developer. The Firebase console will say hello developer, and the console will just change it slightly. We'll say hello, you must be a developer. All right, and then the response is when we ping this function and we get the data back, what is coming back to our app? And so we're going to have here, hello dev, this is me from Firebase. So we'll just return a string back to our Swift application. All right, coming back to the Firebase docs, import the required modules we obviously already did. They have initialize app. We only need to do this if we are actually working with the Firebase app. I think if we were using like Firestore or authentication, we would need to initialize Firebase, but we just are running a cloud function. So I don't think that we need to do that. Add a function. We've already added our own function here. This is just some other function. This is showing us how we could write to Firebase from the function, but we're worried about just running a function to return data back to the call site. We can use an emulator set up for a dev environment. We're going to skip that for now. Deploy your functions to a production environment. Firebase deploy only the functions. Let's go ahead and run that. So I'm going to switch back into VS Code now, and let's go ahead and file save. S, you could also Command S. One thing that is slightly different from our Xcode when we're working in these files is that they do not automatically save. And so if we run our command from the terminal, but we don't save the actual file, then it will not update. So you need to manually be Command S-ing this all the time. Now, from our terminal, in our folder here, we should be able to run Firebase deploy only functions. And I will note again that we can only deploy these functions if we are on the Blaze pricing plan. So if you didn't upgrade your Firebase project, this will not work. Let's go ahead and deploy our functions. Deploying functions. We can see our function that is uploading hello developer. Okay, and unexpected error occurred. Refer to the build logs here. I don't know what the error is. Let's copy this. This is the URL that tells us to see the logs, and let's go to that website. And I have this error here, which the one thing that I changed from my test account was that we added the Firebase logger. So it says the project does not have permission to write logs to Firebase Cloud Logging. The service account running this build, so it's this account here, 436 compute developer, does not have permission. Let's go on the left. Let's go to IAM and admin IAM. This is the 436 compute developer account. On the right, let's click edit. Let's add another role here. And then here, let's search for log. And let's give it access to the cloud logging service agent. Let's go ahead and save. That should allow us to at least log. Let's come back to our code here and let's again try to redeploy it. So our deployment code was up here. Firebase deploy only functions. Let's try it and see if it works. If this doesn't work, I think if we just remove the logger, the Firebase logger from our code, like we can just use console log, and I think we wouldn't need to deal with that. So we don't really need this logger, but I think that will solve it. So let's see here. All right, deploy complete. We got the deploy complete here, but we got this purple warning saying that our function hello developer was skipped because no changes detected. Obviously, we did not change the actual code, but we changed the permissions. So we do want to actually redeploy this. So good job, but also bad job, Firebase. Let's just jump into VS Code quick and just change something. Let's just go developer and click save. I will Command S to save it. Now let's jump back in, and one more time, let's go ahead and deploy the functions, and hopefully this time it actually deploys our new function. Updating hello developer, that's exactly what we wanted to see. All right, deploy is complete. Let's open up our Firebase project now, and inside Firebase, we should be able to go to our functions tab, and you should see it now, your function actually deployed here. And this is the endpoint that we get for the function. So we can see it right here. If there was an error, this should show us that there is an error. Hello developer running on US Central Server, and we have our new endpoint. And that's going to be it for this video. We have now set up our new project. We uploaded and got our cloud function running. We have not triggered the function yet, but in the next video, we're going to actually trigger and get the data from that function. Because this is a separate project, let's go ahead and create a separate repo in GitHub for this so that we can commit it and save this project remotely as well. In order to do that, we're going to use the command line in the terminal to run some Git commands. So first, let's make sure that we have GitHub connected. I will do gh-version. I do not have GitHub command line tools, so let's go ahead and brew install gh for GitHub. Great. Now let's call GitHub auth login. Let's log into GitHub. Where do I want to use github.com? Let's go ahead and set up an SSH key for this. This way we can store this key and use this into the future. Generate a new key and add it to your account. Let's go yes. Generate a passphrase. I'll leave that blank. Just click enter. Title for this key, let's say, let's just call this personal MacBook GitHub CLI. Would you like to authenticate with a web browser? Click yes. Press enter. Should open up a browser on your computer. Go ahead and use your one-time code here. Once you're through, it should then automatically connect. You should now be able to run GitHub gh -- version, and you should have now the GitHub command line. So now that we have our project folder here, let's go ahead and initialize Git in our project. We'll call Git init. Great. We'll say Git add, and we'll use a period for add everything. Then we'll go ahead and commit it. We'll say Git commit. We'll add a -m for message, and we'll call this the initial commit. We committed all of these. Now let's create a remote repo for this. We'll call GitHub repo create. We'll create a repo on GitHub called, I want to use this same name. I will make it private. We will set the source equal to period, which is just referencing our local Git folder that we just created. And then we'll set the remote equal to the origin. This will just set the name for the remote to be called origin. Let's click enter. All right, now you should be able to open up your GitHub and you should be able to see a new repo that is created in GitHub. We haven't actually pushed up our project yet, but we should have a repo here. Now let's go ahead and git push to the origin, and we'll push our main branch. All right, I think this is just our first time pushing to GitHub, and this is like the GitHub key. Go ahead and press yes. And now it should be up and running. So now if you open up your repo on GitHub, you should see your initial commit. Inside your functions, you should have a source folder with your index TypeScript. Cool. Some of you guys already probably knew how to do that, but at least we've created our Cloud Function, we've created our new repo, and we're ready to rock and roll in the next video. Thanks y'all for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.